Hello, my name is Rachel Gibson, and I'm with the League of Women Voters of Nebraska. And today we have a quick overview of the redistricting process in Nebraska. So we'll jump right in. First of all, the League of Women Voters, who we are. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit grassroots organization which advocates for voters' role in democracy. So by nonpartisan, that means that we don't endorse candidates or parties. We really are an issues-focused organization. And redistricting is a primary focus of ours because it is so integral to having a representative government. We've been working in the area of voting rights since the turn of the century, and that began with the women's right to vote, and we've just continued to expand that, advocating for voters to be involved with our electoral process. Specifically related to redistricting, our primary goal is to promote fair and effective representation and public participation. So the idea behind redistricting is that we are building the voting groups that we select leaders from to advocate for our communities. So our goal as the League of Women Voters is to make sure that the public is being involved in that process and that the process is not being manipulated for political gain. So the takeaway message here is that democracy only works when we, the people, are engaged and in the know, and that is exactly what the League aims to do. So what are we talking about when we say redistricting? So redistricting happens every 10 years, and it's the redrawing of our voting districts to reflect population change. And the voting district is that political grouping, our governmental groupings, to say this is our community and this is who gets to vote for our representatives. So there are several different ways that we are grouped. So that could be at the city level, at the county level. The two main things that we're talking about with redistricting today are our state legislature and our House of Representatives. So our state legislature, the 49 folks that we send to Lincoln to make state laws on our behalf, and then the 3 individuals that we send to DC to advocate for Nebraska as a whole. And these districts matter because who you pick to be in that group, in that community, it indicates what issues are going to come to the forefront. So if you think about that, there's some great examples from our last legislative session, and I'm speaking about our state legislator. We have LB 241, which was about worker protections, and this very narrowly did not advance because of 1 or 2 votes, and that's what we're talking about with redistricting, is why that's so important. LB 474, which is medical marijuana, another bill that did not advance by 1 vote. That's 1 district. And when we look at some of the nuances and how much difference there is per district, it's a really close vote. And then LB 451 is a great example. This is the anti-hair discrimination bill, sometimes called the Crown Bill. This is a great example because it was a bill that's been brought before and didn't advance. But the representative from that community listened to the community and brought the bill again, and this time it did pass. So that's the concept of these voting districts. People say, well, what does it really matter? It's things like this: worker protections, medical marijuana, anti-hair discrimination, how we spend our education funds, how we're taxed. That really is the weight of what we're talking about. Now, manipulating these is a form of voter suppression. So if lines are drawn so that communities can't gather around a main need and advocate appropriately, then that's voter suppression in its own way. And that's what this is: manipulating districts, making it mathematically difficult or impossible for a certain candidate to win. So again, we have maps for lots of different things. The 2 we're talking about today is our national districts and then our state districts. And here are our current districts, as you can see. Now, since the last census came out, which is how we manage these, our population has shifted quite significantly, hence the need to redraw. So how does redistricting work? In theory, very simple. You count all the people, you divide them equally, and then you draw lines so that they're groups of that number of people, right? Pretty straightforward. But how the lines are drawn and where they're drawn can really affect a community. Districts also stay the same for 10 years. So this isn't a one-time thing. When you think about this and why this is important, we're talking about 2 presidential terms, 15 US House of Representative election cycles, and 122 state seats, times that our state will be able to vote on state seats. So redistricting is a one time every 10 years, but it has some really long-lasting impacts. Because of this, our focus really is to get it right the first time. So our goal is one person, one vote. The goal is equal and representative districts that will last us through the next 10 years and really reflect the population of our state. So just real quickly, for the visual learners, we'll talk about this in terms of pizza math. So take a pizza. You've got 20 pieces of pepperoni on that pizza, and you want 4 slices. You want the same number of pepperonis on each slice. Now, let's translate this to what this means for districts. Think of the pizza as a whole as Nebraska, and we want 4 slices, 4 voting districts. Each pepperoni is a voter. So we want equal number of pepperonis, aka voters, on each slice, aka voting districts, on our pizza, which is Nebraska. So if we've got a pizza that looks like this, it's pretty easy. Same size piece, same number of pepperonis, same size voting district, same number of voters. Now, Nebraska, much like pizza, does not look like this. Our population is spread out. So if it looks more like this and we cut it the same way with the equal space on each slice or voting district, we suddenly end up with one slice or voting district with one pepperoni voter, and then several others with different amounts. And that's not an equally represented piece of pizza, if you will. So what do? We have to get creative about how we slice the pizza or how we draw our lines. So a few tweaks and lines here, and you'll see, although the size, the amount of space the pizza takes up in the different slices is a little bit different, the number of pepperonis, which again are the voters, are the same in each of those slices. And this is the concept of redistricting, is slicing that pizza so it's fair. Now, what is gerrymandering? Because a lot of people will say gerrymandering and redistricting are the same thing. Redistricting is the process. Gerrymandering is redistricting gone horribly wrong. And this is the concept that there are different ways to draw those lines. In gerrymandering, you're drawing lines to create an uneven playing field. It's basically manipulating percentages in those different areas, number of pepperonis in different areas, to suppress a certain type of group or a certain type of voter. Think about this in terms of lemonade. Let's say you have 1 lemon. You have 4 glasses. If you put all of that lemon in the one glass and the rest are just water, you have a lovely glass of lemonade, right? But if you take that lemon and you squeeze it between the 4 glasses, all of a sudden you have 4 glasses of kind of really weak lemon water. This is the concept of dilution. And this is what some politicians will do to try to make it so that nobody gets any lemonade. The purpose of gerrymandering is to keep and protect power of politicians or groups, and they don't accurately reflect a community and its needs. So again, gerrymandering is a form of voter suppression that has decades-long consequences, as we talked about. So let's go back to our pizza math here. What does that look like? Let's imagine our pizza of Nebraska and our 4 districts again of slices. Now let's change half of those pieces of meat into ham. So you've got 10 pepperonis, 10 ham. Based on those numbers, the meat is voters. We have a half and half pizza, right? So our slices should be half pepperoni, half ham. So if you cut it this way, the way we cut it last, suddenly we have 3 pieces that have more pepperoni pieces than ham pieces. Therefore, they're pepperoni slices, pepperoni districts. And the pizza as a whole is more pepperoni than it is ham based on the slices. So it's a pepperoni pizza, right? Now let's draw the lines a little bit differently. Suddenly this is switched. Exact same pizza, but we've drawn the lines so that there are a couple pieces that have a little more ham than pepperoni. Therefore, it's a ham slice. And therefore 3 pieces of ham, predominantly a ham pizza. Draw it yet again, and we can get a way where it's half and half. We have 2 slices that are predominantly ham and 2 slices that are predominantly pepperoni. This is the most reflective. Again, we're wanting accurate representation. This pizza is half and half Just like our communities are a mix of different political groups, socioeconomic groups, racial groups, we want it to be as representative as possible. So let's translate this to what it might look like in real life. How does gerrymandering work? How is this done?
Basics of gerrymandering are actually pretty simple. If you're a Republican trying to keep power, you want to do two things. First, pack as many Democratic voters as possible into a single district. If you have a district where almost everyone votes Democrat, that means almost half these votes are basically wasted. You can also crack big Democratic areas into separate districts where there are slightly more Republicans. So even though an area has a lot of Democratic votes, they would actually lose in this district and in this district. These are the two elements of classic gerrymandering.
And I'd like to reemphasize there that although this particular visual used that example of Democrats and Republicans, it can be any group. It can be a socioeconomic status, it can be a religious group, it can be a racial or ethnic group. And this is also done by both parties in different parts of the country. So just that little disclaimer there, but this gives a really great visual of how gerrymandering works in the real world, not just on pizza. Again, gerrymandering is redistricting gone wrong, and it's a form of voter suppression, and it has consequences for a full 10 years. So who makes our maps? In Nebraska, our maps are drawn and passed through our legislature. So the maps themselves are actually drawn by our Legislative Research Office. And then we have a 9 state senator redistricting committee that reviews those maps and makes adjustments. Now, this is where both good things and bad things can happen and why it's important the public's involved. So you'll see here the visual of how the process works. We start by getting the data. This just recently happened in the beginning part of August. So now we're at the part where the Legislative Research Office is drafting those maps. Those then go to the redistricting committee. And this is a first place, you'll see the little blue people, where we as the voters, we as the citizens of Nebraska should make our voices heard. We should be looking at those maps and saying, hey, you're cutting my community down the middle. You know, we need to move this line, or that's not representative of our needs as a community. Once the committee hears that feedback, they eventually come with a final draft. They have proposed hearings on those maps. Again, a great place for folks to make their voice heard. And then once those are moved through, they go through the legislature like any bill would. They're actually written like a law. So they go through the legislative process like any other bill would. Once those are approved and voted on, they go to the governor for veto or approval. So that's what the process looks like. And we are in the midst of it right now. And as you can see from the little blue people, we the people are part of this process. We are asking 9 representatives to draw maps for our entire state, and no one knows our community quite like we do. So we need to make sure that we're advocating for what our community looks like. This is just a quick visual of the 9 folks who are on our redistricting committee this time around, and you'll notice there are 3 from each congressional district, and there is a balance of different representation from political parties. So what can you do? We've talked generally about what redistricting is, why it's so important. What can you do about it? First of all, just talk to your friends and family. As I said, redistricting only happens every 10 years. Some people don't even know what it is, and it doesn't happen every day. So that makes sense. But talk to your friends and family. Let them know this is happening. Let them know that this is about their community. Use the internet, use social media, follow the league, follow some other organizations. I've listed a few here that are great resources for redistricting. Use those hashtags if you're out there, help amplify the voice. Finally, contact policymakers, and this can be done a couple different ways, but write, call, email, whatever works for you. Let them know that you're listening. I can't tell you the number of times I've heard someone on the floor of the legislature say, well, you know, my constituents told me this, or I haven't heard about this issue. Make sure they hear you. Attend public hearings. Again, that's mid-September. We don't know the exact dates. The special session starts September 13th and goes through the end of the month. And so it'll be sometime in that time frame. We're not exactly sure when, but if you follow us on Twitter or Facebook, we'll let you know. Join our day of action. We're really excited about this event. This is Saturday, September 18th. We're going to have locations in Lincoln and in Omaha. where basically we're going to get together and advocate, rally around that idea of fair maps. So there will be snacks, there will be activities, and a chance to just make our presence known as a community that we want fair maps. So to wrap all this up, your voice is an important and necessary part of our democracy. The process of redistricting is the way to keep that formally in our voting districts so that no one person's vote is worth more than anyone else. One person, one vote. We want fair maps. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll see you on the 18th.